Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice Time. We dive into some big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined by Trevor Neufeld, who covers the Calgary Flames here at Hockey Hot Stove and covers the Flames in general and the NHL in general. It's great to have you on for the first time. Trevor, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. It's the middle of that AHL, NHL, just the hockey dog days of the season, January. We're getting ready for this stretch right now between now and the Olympics. And it's kind of interesting that
Yes.
you're it's a trade. It's like this sprint till then. The season's a marathon. It's a sprint till then, and then it's a little break, and then there's a sprint again, trade deadline, and then the playoffs and all that stuff. But it's all fun stuff. But as the season goes on, and I wasn't planning on talking about this week, but I actually want to get your thoughts on this as on a lot of the games that happened lately, where we've seen a lot of, just put it bluntly, drubbings or just these stompings of teams where this past week we saw the Devils lose 9-0 to the Islanders. That's the big one. We
Oh
saw
yeah.
8-2. Colorado Avalanche beat the Ottawa Senators 8-2. There was that 10-2 Bruins beating the Rangers game, and we cover the NHL. We've seen a lot of craziness. I want to start there, which is, have you ever covered a game, a 9-0 type of game, or a 9-0 loss?
Well, it hasn't gotten that high up there in terms of the Flames because they just stick so low event. But like their last few games, it's 5-1, 4-1, 4-1, and then they squeezed out a 2-1 win just on Saturday. But there's a lot of games where they're pretty much fully out, and it's pretty early on. You can tell.
What's crazy, yeah, what's crazy is I cover the AHL, so you see a
Yes.
lot of craziness in that league, and
Yes.
I've seen a few of those 9-0 type of games, and there's a lot to take away from it, or a lot to think about with it. But the one impression is you feel like one team forgets to show up, where there's at some point during the game where the other team scores on practically every possession. It feels like every time they get the puck, they just go down the ice and score and shoot it on net and scores. And that's kind of how, well, rewatching the Islanders Devils game, it felt like every time the Islanders touched the puck at some point, they were scoring.
Yes.
You feel that, and then the other part, which I think I want to ask you about. At some point, you realize this isn't a typical lopsided game, because there are some games that get out of hand, or there will be games that the team jumps out to a 3-0 lead and cruises to a 5-1, 5-0 victory, or the other way around, where it's 1-1 and they score 5 goals in the third period and just pull away, and you're like, oh wow, it got out of hand quickly. But there are some games where you cover and you start to realize, or at some point, this is not a typical game. So I'll ask you, when do you realize that? And then the other part is, when do you kind of realize, I'm not going to write a game recap. I have to write something else. This is something historic. I might have to write a bigger picture thing, or take a different approach to it.
Yes, I'll be counting on probably two hands how many people are going to be reading the game recap on a 6-1 loss or 7-0. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that we were discussing this a little earlier that this is due to the condensed schedule of the Olympics this year. And there's the odd like road and home and road back to back. That's a lot of
Yeah, a lot of
hyphenation.
teams are playing like home and homes, or they're playing the back to backs, the second of a back to back, and stuff like that. Yeah, it is interesting, because I would ask you about that, which is if teams are going to read into these games, and it seems like they wouldn't, because the condensed schedule, and a lot of people are talking about it, that they're not going to read much into this.
Yes. So let's take the Devils for example. They had a home and or away and home back to back, November 28th, 29th. So 2 days, two games. They beat Buffalo, they lose to Philly, and since then they have been 6-13-1. So it could be some of these are they're just getting these gut punches and then all of a sudden they're on a slide.
What I wonder though is, because you that's what's interesting, is usually like a bad loss or a few in a row result in changes. And
Yes.
I don't know if these losses, I mean, the teams that have had these losses, you're looking at the Devils, you're looking at the Senators, you're looking at the Rangers. Everyone's saying they're going to make changes at some point. And
Hmm.
I don't think those will do it. Maybe in the big picture, they'll make
Hmm.
changes, but they're not going to after one game. And I think the big thing is we're going to probably see a lot more of these, especially leading up to the break. And then after the Olympic break, you're going to see a lot of teams that are either tired, missing players, or just finding their
Hmm.
sea legs again. It's going to be that second wave. So I think it's going to be interesting is that we're going to see more of these. It's almost a full circle like moment where used to be in the 80s. It was you'd see these 9-0 games or 10 to
Yeah.
1 games, and now we're seeing it again, a little full circle moment
Yeah,
for
I
some of
don't
us.
mind that. It's fun to see scoring going back up a bit because I think for a while people were just convinced that scoring was never going to go back up and they mastered the art of defense at the NHL level and goaltenders are just going to keep getting bigger and faster and stuff like that. But no, well, we're starting to see teams get blown out again. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I always wonder with that whether it's offense or skill is going up. And that's actually something I was talking
Yeah.
over the weekend with someone about whether it's the future. I was talking about it, and I actually wrote about it in my weekly column. What the future holds in hockey, and part of that is maybe we're going full circle where skill is up and offense is up. And that's the thing that I was told about these high scoring games. Don't read much into it because this season the condensed schedule is really going to put all these into a funk or really put all these games out there that you're going to see a lot of them and not to read too much into
Hmm.
that. But, and the other layer why it's going full circles, I think you see defenses coming back because schemes are smarter. Uh, Teams are playing with their goaltender and mind more. They have more data to say, this is how our goaltender plays. Let's defend around his strength, the goaltender's strengths, and you're seeing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that the future. I don't know what the future holds, but it is a little exciting for this season. We're seeing some of these games, even if maybe they're not close, but they're just fun when you get a lot of highlights. But actually, uh, on the bigger scale, not we're talking about lost games and then talk about
Hmm.
lost seasons. I want to talk about a little bit about that because you've covered the Flames for a while. I've
Yeah.
covered the AHL, so you have when you have boots on the ground, you have a little bit of a different perspective. But at every point, every season, you kind of realize that the season is lost. So I'll ask you that first off. What when do you realize that yeah, this is a lost season? It's not gonna be. We're underachieving. Playoffs aren't going to happen. Probably it's a bottom five finish or something like that. And then the other part is kind of how you pivot from there.
Yeah, I think in Calgary it seems to be a weird kind of song and dance because they don't really give up on the playoffs very easily. I mean, they stormed. I think they went 11, 2, and 3 to finish the year last year and barely missed the playoffs. And like the year before, they did kind of count themselves down and out, and then they had traded so many veterans, and then they, kind of glided to the end of the season, kind of limped to the end of the season, and Markstrom wasn't playing his best, so we ended up securing a better pick. But when you actually define that, I don't know. I guess coaches seem to be pretty intense on the whole mathematical elimination. I think the players appreciate that, but yeah, as a little more objective, I think that you can kind of recognize it a little earlier. And it depends on the season too. But I mean, this year the Flames, they should be out, but they just clawed to 500 and now they're bad again. And I think this might be it, but it's
I
it's
think
never easy to tell with Calgary. They always just fight tooth and nail to get just below a playoff spot.
well, I think well, yeah, it's interesting because the Flames are one of those teams that yeah they'll be out of it. They were early in the season; they looked like they were out of it, and all of
Oh,
a sudden they get in a hot streak, and it's like you could talk yourself into a playoff spot. Wow, we're not so far behind. We're only a few points out. The Flames are
yeah.
one of those teams that have done that, and this season in general, a lot of teams all it takes is a 3 game winning streak, and you're back in it where you feel oh yeah we can make a playoff push and heck, the Sabres had that 10 game winning streak that put them
Oh
back into it.
yeah.
So it's one of those weird seasons. But I want to ask you about something because when you're on the ground, you feel the energy of a team, and I think that's an interesting part to this is that teams won't admit that they've given up. Teams won't say, "Oh yeah, it's a lost season." Coaches are coaching for their jobs, players are fighting for their jobs, but at some
Yes.
point you get this energy from the team, or that you feel this impression of this team is not going to be good this season. And you when you talk to the players after games, you talk to the teams, you can feel the energy of a winning environment, a losing environment. You pick up on that quickly. And I think
Oh
that's what's
yeah.
interesting is that uh for me it's the AHL level where around November, okay, which teams are going to be in trouble. It's a long season, and some teams find their
Yes.
footing and rebound and make the playoffs and then could go on a run. That said, early in the season, you can tell which teams just based on being around them have that energy. So for me, I always look at really that first month. After that first month, you could tell which teams are out of it, which I think was the case this season, at least on the AHL level. You can't tell the contenders yet, but you can tell that. And then once you really hit January, you really start to feel it. So the cliche is American Thanksgiving, but I
Mhm.
wonder when you start to feel that impression among the players, even if they don't say it, but
Yeah.
you pick up on the energy, you pick up on body language. I mean, that's a big thing that people don't talk a lot about after games when you talk to players and when you talk to them is body language, just
Oh
the
yeah.
impression they give you, and you can read a lot into that. Coaches sometimes the way they present themselves sometimes as well. You can tell other coaches just their energy changes and all that stuff. So I wonder what for you if you've noticed that ever at a certain time. Okay, this team realizes sometimes it is later in the season. It is January or February where a team all of a sudden shifts just the way that they're acting.
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, body language, 80% of communication. It's interesting that we're in the written kind of the written form of media because sometimes, body language is pretty important. Uh, yeah, I think you can generally tell from the bench, like what the the expressions, the body language, especially like on a streak like the Flames are on right now. I mean, yeah, they won their last game, but this is the lowest energy that they've been, and yeah, they're just hanging their heads, as you could see in the interviews. They're waiting for this trip to be over. So it's and by a longer association, and I think this season's been a rough one. I think they started out, and not to ring that bell again, but another back-to-back to start the season, and and then they just went on a huge losing streak, and all of a sudden yeah. I don't know if they're waiting for it to be over, but even when they went on a hot streak, they didn't seem to be playing at 100%. So I don't know. It maybe the season's a wash, but it'd be interesting to know what they, quietly believe versus what they're saying, because they want to win still, and it's their job
Yeah,
to
that's what's always
job to get the
interesting is
two
that,
points.
and that's what's always interesting is that for us as people covering these teams that are your coverage does. I mean, our coverage changes. That's for sure. Where all of a sudden you this time of year it's the trade rumors where you shift from but you're based on what you're writing about. You're either writing about you're being a buyer or you're being a seller. It's just that's the reality of what we do. And
Yes.
it's always interesting when it's like it's a lost season. It's like okay, now what? And it's like okay, you have to shift what you're writing about or what you're covering because it's okay now it's about which players are getting traded or what does our team's future look like? What does our team beyond this season look like? And I think that you kind of see that shift as well as the season goes on. I feel like have you ever noticed that when you're first of all when you're covering a team, but second the way the team presents itself is looking ahead where it's all right we're going to look ahead to the future and the way I mean in the Flames case it's probably a little murky because they don't want to admit it and they'll never
No.
fully rebuild but
Never admit it.
you do feel the last season the way players talk about it maybe not the play like oh yeah we're going to make the push for the playoffs but oh yeah I'm playing for a future or we're playing for a future we're playing for jobs you feel that shift I always wonder
Yes.
if you feel that covering it.
Well, their offense gets better once they're just playing for jobs and not trying to play for the playoffs. They kind of relax a little bit in just in transition. So you start to see a team that's been gripping the stick all year, and then so they start scoring a few goals, so winning 5-4. Like it happened last year. They only had a game or two
It's
where they were
it's the
mathematically eliminated, but
like the
they
post
looked
trade
great.
deadline surge that teams have, where they sell off. The Canucks even had that this year. They trade Quinn Hughes and they win
Yes.
like what 3 games in a row.
Yeah. That team's such a mess. It's very confusing what's happening on any given day in Vancouver. It's yeah, it's been very strange for that team. But now they're near
It
the bottom.
and they are now. And yeah, they were the team that they trade Quinn Hughes, they go on a hot streak right away, which is just bizarre that that happens. Oh, not maybe not entirely when you think about it, considering some of the teams that are also struggling now, and the trade does kind of take the anxiety or the stress out of the room, which you now understand with the Devils that okay, they didn't make that trade. Now look at how
No.
the stress is built there, or the tension that is built there. But it makes sense the Canucks went on a run, but all of a sudden they're back to where they are, where yeah, they're not a good team again. They might be selling again. I actually want to ask you about this season, which is, do you already see teams that are early sellers? Because the way the season's unfolding, it doesn't look like every team's going to talk themselves into holding or not selling, but maybe there are a few teams that will start to sell, especially now that we're in the second wave of trades. I call it the first wave when Quinn Hughes got dealt before the holiday
Yeah.
break, and now we're in that second wave. The third wave is going to be after the Olympics between the trade deadline. But do you see any teams kind of selling now?
Well, I mean, we got two deadlines this year, which is pretty sweet. Two trade deadlines. I think we're seeing like a division in the East. Like there's the Panthers with 49 points and then the Devils with 46, and that seems to be the fall off of teams that are kind of competing for the playoffs. You're either 550 or you're not in terms of a points perspective or point percentage, but like the West it still seems like that there's one team just one spot open in the wild card that any team, with 45 points or more. So they know there's another fall off. The Flames have 42, the Ducks have 45, and Blackhawks have 45. So yeah, any of those teams could grab it, but yeah, I think just counting really quickly, I think we got about 8 teams that are seem to be confirmed out, and there's going to be a lot more than 8 teams missing the playoffs. So that's going to be pretty interesting, especially with this big long Olympic break.
I want to throw this at you because I think we're going to start to see a few trades now where a few maybe minor deals, or actually maybe not minor, but a few trades are going to happen. Not anything, no team's going to go off the rails or go crazy. The one team actually, ironically, that would be the Vancouver Canucks, because if Jim Rutherford has taught us anything, it's that he operates on his own timeline, where
Yeah.
if he sees a deal, he's not waiting. He's making the deal. And I think when you saw with Quinn Hughes, it was people were wondering, why are you doing this deal now and not waiting until the trade deadline or waiting
Oh,
until next year's trade deadline?
I
Made the
loved
deal
it.
right away. Uh, in the middle of Bill Guerin rolling meatballs, which I hope those meatballs came out well. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress on that. He's not going to waste his time. I don't think a lot of GMs though are going to tear it down right now. I'll throw this at you though, that we are starting to see. We're talking about a lot about the Canucks. Surprisingly, we're going to see another team become the Canucks. I actually wrote about this as well in this week's
Yes.
column. And you look at some of these teams that, like, again, the Canucks. It's easy to look back at them and forget they won the Pacific Division. They had a team that looked ready to contend for years to come. Quinn Hughes is
Yes.
entering his prime. JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, you can go through. Brock Besser was coming off a career year. It looked like a team that was set to contend. Now they're
Hmm.
tearing it down. I see a few teams in the NHL that might be entering tear down territory. Not now, but in the future. You look at them to monitor. The 3 teams I highlight, or I've looked at, are the Devils, the Jets, the Senators. They're the teams that to circle. The Senators, I think, will actually find their footing and rebounds. But
Yeah, they'll
obviously,
be
with all the
fine.
news, they're the team that everyone's circling now because they're in the news and all that stuff.
Yeah, four in a
But
row.
I see a team, and I think the Devils are a prime team that could do it. Maybe even like you look at the Bruins or the Rangers, those teams that have struggled lately. I mean, the Bruins have found their footing again, but where you start to wonder, okay, maybe they start trading away big pieces, they start trading away big names. I think that might happen this season. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, in the West, I think the question would be, is it the Kings or are the Stars going to fall? I don't know because the Stars are 3-3-4 in their last 10, and the Kings 4-5-1, and they both seem like they might be the next team to kind of hit a wall. But whether they're tearing it down, I don't know. I think the East has some teams definitely, like the Rangers should be like, right? They probably should tear it down.
Well, they should. The question is if they will or not. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's true.
the difficult thing for them is you get Panarin to move his no trade clause, and can you get him to move? And the other fascinating layer to this whole thing is that
Mhm.
there's not going to be a great free agency. I think we actually, if you look at all the players that got signed with Kyle Connor, Kirill Kaprizov, Connor McDavid, everyone got signed, and free agency got ruined in the sense that there's
Mhm.
not an intense free agency, and with the cap going up, teams have the ability to re-sign their players and extend them, and they are. You look at Adrian Kempe. The next version of free agency frenzy is going to be trade frenzy. Teams are going to make crazy trades. That's my prediction.
Ooh.
I could be wrong because, what do I know? My thought is that teams are going to make these crazy trades where, with the cap, especially with the cap going up, because Steven Stamkos' contract is suddenly not a bad one to take on if you have 8 million is a lot to take on, but when the cap's going up, all of a sudden 8 million doesn't look so bad. Other sports
Yeah.
have this perception where they, because the cap has been going up for years in football or basketball, whatever it is, that taking on a bad contract isn't so bad. Because of that, you're going to see these crazy trades. That's my prediction on this. Where Panarin, if he waives his no trade clause, the Rangers will move him and will get a lot for him. We're going to see teams that want to make a splash, maybe the Red Wings, for example, who couldn't sign any of these big players in free agency, and they'll have a ton of cap space and they need to use it. That they make a
Do a
risky
trade.
trade. They try to get someone like him, and just the added layer to that. So you just add your thoughts onto that too.
Well, I think yeah, I think there's going to be some big trades. It'll be interesting to see if they're hockey trades where they're player for player or whether they're, like liquidation, assets, picks, futures. But it's going to be an interesting. I think the Flames are looking at trading, or at least Friedman was saying that the Flames are kind of leaning into trading Rasmus Anderson before the Olympic break.
I was
That'll be
thinking the added layer to that. Speaking of the Flames, is Nazem Kadri. That's a
Oh yeah.
that was a
That's the
contract.
trade. Yeah,
That
that
was
would
a
be a weird
contract
one.
that was a contract at the time. I think it was 6 years and what's the AAV? I think it's nine.
Seven
It's
times seven.
it's 7 by so it's 7 by 7. So
Oh yeah.
7 million for years was a contract nobody wanted to take on. But now
Yeah.
there's, I believe, 3 years left on that deal. And yeah, he's 34, and you wonder how long he's going to be competitive for. And it's a no trade clause. So having him move
Yeah.
it is the difficult part. And I think this is something that the Devils are learning firsthand that when a player has a no trade
That.
clause, how you approach the player probably matters. And I think it matters for the Flames too, where yeah, they can go over to Nazem Kadri and say, okay, listen, like we're in a rebuild or we're going to tear it down and we need you to move. I mean, we would like to understand if you want to stick out this contract, but we're not going to be good for a while. So if you want to end your career on a cup contender, we can send you to a handful of teams. It's the way that teams are approaching this. The Devils went over to Dougie Hamilton. See, I don't know what happened, but they must have said. They must have said, we want to trade you. And he said no. And now he's stuck there. And it's kind of like a
Yeah,
breakup where one
regretting that
person doesn't
one.
want to move out. I don't know. It's one of those situations. So it is interesting because yeah, Nazem Kadri, for example, is a good example. It's a bad contract, or it was for years, but now that the cap's going up,
Yeah,
teams will
that's
want teams will want that middle six center who plays playoff hockey, who's won a cup, won it with the
oh
Avalanche,
yeah.
and was a key part of their run. you can talk yourself into a lot of teams making that type of deal. So it's just an added layer to this.
Yeah, I mean he can still get real hot. He scored 12 goals in the last 17 games of last year down the stretch. So, there's that clutch side of him. I know he's earning second line center money with the cap going up. I mean, I don't think it'd be too rough of a trade. I I think the Flames are losing whatever well, it's tough to say with Nas, but he plays real hard and he's kind of on a cold streak right now. Just touching on the Devils, like the Flames tried that with Markstrom. They wanted to trade Markstrom at the deadline, and then it fell through. And then it was that awkward. Like I read your column. It's like trying breaking up and then staying roommates, I think was the term you're using.
Yeah, or it's when there's a breakup and both sides are don't want to be together, but they're still living together. Which is
Yeah, but they're
like,
still
okay,
living together.
I don't want to try to bring in any analogies. People trying to think of what uh any stories involving that, but you can imagine that type of situation. Or let's say someone someone gets fired from and is no longer part of the office, but somehow is still there, just sticking around, and everyone's like, all right, can all right, well, I feel it's better off if just everyone moves on. I think with the Devils, that's kind of what you're seeing now, which is there's a lot of players that were discussed in trades where even taking Dougie Hamilton out of it, you look at they'll read all these columns and they could say, okay, I don't pay attention to them or I don't focus on them, but you can imagine you know what players are worth, or players know what they're worth, and players know
Yeah.
what the asking price is. When you hear that the trade between the Wild and the Canucks, what it was, you can imagine that the players on the Devils knew, okay, this is what the trade would
Okay.
have looked like, and they know, okay, it's no secret we were probably a part of that when we were asked to waive our no trade clause, and it creates that awkwardness where,
Oh
okay, we
yeah.
were asked to waive our no trade clause, this impression we don't want to be here, and now you're stuck, and now you're still there. It is that weird sort of feeling, and it does I think add to being a general manager in hockey, where it's obviously a people's business, but part of it is how you approach these situations, or how you
Yes.
deal with these not first how do you deal with messes, which I mean, I guess now it's the Senators, you can see that again, you see that as well, or the Canucks last year. It's how do you put out fires, how do you handle these messes, and you're seeing that as well. I think it's just interesting, another layer to being a GM. It's not just fantasy hockey, or not just drafting and picking players and trading players.
No.
A lot of that, like managing people, which I think is an
Yes,
extra layer
it's
to it.
industry of people. It's yeah, fans sometimes forget that, it's you're managing.
Yeah, and I mean that's actually one thing I was thinking about. As much as I despise, despise as much the disdain I have for Lou Lamoriello, because of just the way he operated. A little old. I mean, not a little old school, about as old school as it got, and just
Yes.
a lot of the rules that he had in place, which were frustrating. The way he felt about the media and the fans and all those things, like as frustrating as that is, give him credit. How often did you hear about stuff getting out there from him?
It's incredible how tight of an organization he ran.
Yeah,
In
you
terms of
you you
secrets.
you heard nothing from them. Yeah, you heard nothing from the Islanders when he was there. When he was with the Devils, stuff, just there wasn't craziness that got out there. So I got to give him credit there. I mean, you got to give him credit for that. Sometimes some of these GMs that they're able to operate, they may operate wild, but give them credit.
Yeah, that would take a lot. I remember Friedman used to talk about how he would just give up on trade talks if it ever leaked. So, that's pretty intense. Imagine just throwing away a blockbuster that you've been working on because yeah, Friedman found it out.
Well, there was actually a story back in the day. A columnist from Montreal, I don't know his name, but it's actually been talked about on Jeff Merrick talks about it on his podcast. So shout out to him. He's not listening to this, so don't worry. But he
You never
actually talked
know.
about a trade that was going to happen in Montreal, or Montreal and Toronto. One of the columnists said, if you make that trade, I will ride you out of town. So they didn't make the trade. He's like, I will keep writing about it and cover it to the point where I'll ride you out of town. the writers don't have that same leverage, but it's just a funny
No,
story about all those
podcasters
things.
now.
But yeah, maybe there would be a podcaster who could actually say if you make that trade, it'd probably be or TV personality. Maybe someone like Paul
Yeah,
Bizanet could do
chiclets.
that, where they'd say if you make that trade, or maybe someone in on Sportsnet could do that, where they'd say if you make that trade, I will ride you out of town. Although with some of these TV stations are a little more buttoned up, where they you can't talk about those
Yes.
things. So it is an interesting world where the influence that maybe people don't have, but maybe they can find a way to talk about it. Uh,
Yeah.
all right, I guess that's all we got. We ended up shifting this to a lot of trade talk and speculation, but this was fun. Trevor, thank you for joining.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, well, while you're at it, I guess just any plugs, anything you're working on. I know it's trade rumor season for sure,
Y-
or maybe you're writing about the Flames making a playoff push. But what do you anything big that you're working on? Plug away.
well, I mean, we were getting into speculation and stuff, and yeah, the rumors are starting to hit Calgary again, so that'll be what's on the menu this week. But I mean, last week I just dug into how obscenely different Calgary's home and away record was. Like they're a playoff team at home, and if you didn't watch road games, you'd think they're pretty good, but they are the worst team in the league by far when they're playing on the road. So that was my last piece. It's got a lot of crazy stats, so I'd recommend checking it out. It's pretty great. Pretty happy with it. But other than that, yeah, I'm on the Hockey Hot Stove, and you can find me on Twitter just by searching up Trevor Neufelds. And yeah, that's all for me.
I'm curious about that column about the Flames home and road splits because if they're
Oh.
terrible on the road, I don't know if they played the Rangers yet. The Rangers are terrible at home, so
Oh
I
yeah.
wonder if they might have already played and I just completely forgot about that game. But if they play each other again, something's got to give there. It's the line I've said about covering the AHL a few times where one team allows 4 goals per game and the other team only averages 2 goals per game. So I'm like, well, this is what I've said to the person next to me. This is what happens when a stoppable force meets a movable object. and I'm like, that's the kind of game we're getting. So if the Flames do go to New York and play the Rangers at Madison Square Garden, I think the Rangers it's a crazy low number how many games they've won at MSG. So if that does happen, that something's got to give. So that'll be fun. But I digress.
March 10th.
Oh, March 10th. Yes, circle the calendar for that. I think that might be though I think that's after the trade deadline, so it might be a little bit of a
Yes.
different type of game. Although that could be if both teams sell, that could be a game that
Oh,
people
high
really enjoy.
offense, I bet.
Yeah, or just throw it away. It's funny because that could have. Oh, conversely, it could be Dustin Wolf versus Igor Shesterkin. It could be a
Ooh,
goaltending duel.
yeah,
I
that
don't know,
could be
but
pretty glorious.
anyway, I digress on that. But for now, that's all we got. We hope you enjoyed. Please, well, like, share, comment, subscribe. I don't know if you can actually do that on Spotify, so I digress. But check out all the great content at Hockey Hot Stove. You can find my work there. You can find Trevor's work there. And until next time, tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.